afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. We know that gun violence has struck our city in many ways, from suicides to mass shootings, where innocent victims are caught in the crossfire, to one in Lake City last year, to gun violence in Rainier Beach. And last evening, during the peak of our rush hour, a dispute between two individuals escalated into gun violence in one of the most crowded and busiest blocks of our downtown city. Bullets hit innocent men, women, and at least one child. As a result, 7 people were injured and 1 additional person died on the scene. On behalf of the entire city, I extend my most profound condolences to the loved ones of the person who was killed yesterday. I also extend the city's support and prayers to the 7 survivors and hope they have a healthy recovery. Know that Chief Best and I and the entire city of Seattle are working to bring the perpetrators to justice. We have victim advocates at the hospitals for those who were injured to make sure that they and their families are taken care of. During rush hour, this is one of our busiest corridors, with families shopping, workers leaving their offices, individuals walking home, and commuters catching the bus or light rail. It's estimated that almost 50,000 people or more board buses on 3rd Avenue every day. Most of us in the city have walked that block about that time of day. I have done it hundreds of times in my life, sometimes with my kids at all stages of their lives. And no one, absolutely no one in our city or country should step out of a coffee shop or get on a bus with fear of violence. Many of us have friends or family who were near the location or lived in the area or worked in the area. It was a terrifying experience for them and traumatic for our whole city. And while we are better than many cities when it comes to gun violence, we are not immune to gun violence. Following last night's incident, SPD quickly identified 3 suspects. SPD has arrested and booked one of the shooters. The other 2 shooters were also known to SPD and have extensive criminal histories and gang connections. I want to emphasize to the public, each of those individuals is considered armed and dangerous. If you see them, if you know them, please do not approach them. Call 911 immediately. I want to extend my deep gratitude to the members of the Seattle Police Department and the Seattle Fire Department who worked so quickly to respond last night and help people in need. Both police and fire were there literally in seconds. Our first responders were administering life-saving aid, taking victims to the hospital, and working to secure the area and witnesses for the residents and visitors to our city. Victims were spread across 1.5 city blocks in one of the densest, busiest places in our downtown core. The scene for police and fire is a large scene and took great efforts and resources to contain. Like always, in our time of sorrow, we saw one of the most horrific chapters last night in the city of Seattle, but we also saw the best of Seattle, including at least one worker in one of the cafes, a nurse who, instead of sheltering herself, went to aid one of the victims. We also had workers at local restaurants bringing people in, sheltering them in place, taking courageous actions, and helping the firefighters and police in the area. As I said, this was a large scene that took great resources. Over 100 SPD officers, many SFD firefighters, and our partners from the King County Sheriff's Office responded to the scene in some way. I am so grateful for their quick response and for their ability to do such good work. We need a call to action on gun violence across America and in Seattle. Gun violence anywhere is unacceptable, and it is especially jarring when it occurs in the heart of our city, where tens of thousands of people work, shop, and live, and happens in one of the most busy intersections at the most busy time of day. I've talked to many mayors about gun violence over the last 2 years, many cities who face greater challenges than us. But Chief Best and I want to tell you, we will not allow this to be the new normal. That is not acceptable. We know that gun violence is preventable, and in the city of Seattle, we are taking urgent action to stop this cycle of violence. We know that the guns in this incident were not supposed to be in the hands of the people who had them. As the former U.S. Attorney for Western Washington, I worked for years to ensure that career criminals who were known to possess firearms could be held accountable, and to curb the illegal sale of firearms to people who should not have them. Seattle has some of the strictest gun laws in the state, from our safe storage law that prevents firearms from falling into the wrong hands, to our emergency risk protection orders, which take guns out of the hands of those who may pose a risk to themselves or others. In 2019, SPD took over 1,100 guns off the street of Seattle, making people safer. But ultimately, we are a city that exists in a county that exists in a state. We must join our resources together to meet this challenge. We have to do it urgently because literally, people's lives are at stake. I want to talk a little bit about gang violence because we have seen an uptick in gang violence in this region. Unfortunately, this violence has crossed city borders and involves multiple cities in King County. We are going to use every tool to address this problem. For months, the Seattle Police Department has been investigating and making multiple arrests in this arena. Both Chief Best and I have had numerous conversations together, and we have also talked to federal prosecutors, including last night and today. We will use every tool we have to make sure that gangs and guns will not be a problem in any neighborhood or any community in Seattle. But we also have to make new investments in youth violence prevention and programs that are diversionary. We have to do both ends of the spectrum. And last year we were able to do more of those types of investments to make sure that the youth in our city make good choices. I also truly want to recognize that every resident and every business in our city expects Chief Best, our criminal justice system, and me, their mayor, to be accountable to keep people safe. That is our job, and it is one of the most important and fundamental jobs that we have. And while we have worked to address gang violence across our city or public safety challenges downtown, we can and we must do more. We are a big city that faces some of the same gun and gang violence problems that other big cities have. Chief Best will address some of the steps that we have taken and some of the additional steps we will be taking. Downtown specifically, the Pike Pine corridor has been a focus of our public safety efforts in recent months. Last year, we focused community-based emphasis patrols in the Pike Pine corridor. SPD has been doing a series of operations to take guns and drugs off the street. Their consistent work in the West Precinct allowed officers to arrive at the scene within 15 seconds. I want to say that again. Because of the work they were doing in that corridor, they were able to be at the scene within 15 seconds. But we are going to do more. Chief Best and I believe we can add more resources downtown, and we can deploy 2 mobile precincts, one at the courthouse and one in 4th and Pine near Westlake. Members of my staff has also been meeting with residents and businesses, including the Downtown Seattle Association, and we will continue to conduct robust outreach with businesses, stakeholders, and others in the downtown area. We will listen to what the community needs, and we will address it. Our downtown is the heart of our city. Violence has struck in almost all quarters of our city in the last 3 years. We will address violence wherever it strikes. But we know that downtown is the heart and a place that everyone in our city travels at some time. Again, it's home to hundreds of thousands of workers, tens of thousands of transit commuters, and major events and attractions that really draw people from throughout the region. Our officers will continue working tirelessly to make downtown safe. And again, I'm going to close and hand it to Chief Best, who will give you some comments, and then Chief Scoggins, and then we'll take Q&A. But before I do that, I want to emphasize again, if you know or see these people who are suspects in this crime, please do not approach them. Please call 911 immediately. And with that, I will turn it over to Chief Best. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. First, thank you, Mayor, for those very excellent words of encouragement and for your continued support of the police department. Let me just start off by saying, first and foremost, as the Chief of Police, someone who grew up in this area and has 5 generations of my family here, what happened last night is unacceptable. As soon as the scene was stabilized last night, myself and my entire command team accelerated the work we've already been doing on plans for addressing ongoing issues in the immediate area. As a police department and as a community, we must work together to not allow something like this to ever happen again. I'm going to confirm for you some of the updates from overnight and some of the information that we released this morning. But again, last night, it was unacceptable, and we know this. The call came in at about 5 p.m., and within seconds, as the mayor mentioned, within seconds, officers who were already in the area on the emphasis and on some by bust were on the scene of the situation. Those officers immediately started securing the scene, providing life-saving efforts to the victims, locking down the areas that we needed to lock down for further investigation. It was a large scene. We weren't clear when we first got there if we had an active shooter or what was happening, so we had to make sure we had active intelligence about what was going on. And as the mayor mentioned, it was over a block and a half of victimization. So it was a pretty large scene for us to secure. We know that we have 2 subjects that were in front of the McDonald's, and some sort of dispute occurred with the 3rd person being there. Guns were pulled, shots were fired, people were running, and the subjects fled from each other. That's what we know, that's what we walked into. Not clear exactly what was going on at first. So we were securing information. Once we figured it wasn't an active situation, we secured a lot of evidence and information. The gang unit detectives who were on scene did an initial review of the videos, and they recognized one of the subjects who was in front of that McDonald's as a person that they'd had contact with previously. They knew him to be a felon, and they knew that he could not be in possession of a firearm, which he had in his hand in the video. So they went right up to Harborview and located this person and took them into custody and arrested him for illegal possession of a firearm. The other 2 subjects, we put their information out earlier as well. We know them, and that we know that they've been arrested multiple times, one over 50 times, the other over 25 times. I don't have their specific criminal history here. We normally don't report on it. But suffice it to say, multiple arrests for each of these individuals. Overnight, officers recovered a tremendous amount of digital and physical evidence. We have multiple shell casings from 3 different caliber of firearms. So those are the details we know from overnight. Let me address some of the broader concerns that I'm sure people are interested in. First of all, let me be clear. Seattle is one of the safest major cities in the country. Major cities everywhere are dealing with issues of gang and gun violence. We're not immune to that. But, in comparison, we're a very safe city on this very issue. Like I said, every city in the country is working with these issues. Just yesterday morning, we made a significant arrest, contacted a person who was involved in a prior shooting. When we got him in custody, we recovered a MAC-10 with an extended magazine and also another firearm. Officers were working in the area on emphasis last night. They were working other operations as well. And that's why, again, we were there so quickly. This is not a new thing. We know we've had an uptick in gang violence. We had a press conference about a week and a half ago talking about this very issue. In the interim, we've had our gang unit and others out, so, following up, securing evidence, and taking people into custody. We are reinvigorated to even put more pressure on, because we don't want another scene like that to happen in this lovely city of Seattle. Some of the things that we're doing is we're adding additional gang detectives to our gang unit. If you go out to 4th Avenue, you'll see the mobile precinct is out there right now. We're going to start rotating officers from other areas of the city into the mobile precinct and into downtown to help augment some of the resources there. That doesn't mean we're abandoning other areas of the city, but we have a situation here where we really need to focus our efforts on this downtown core for the shootings that are occurring. We can't have another press conference where we're talking about one person dead and 7 other people injured in our downtown core. Additionally, we have additional resources with our investigative unit that's going to be out doing some additional investigation on other issues as well. And we have our Collaborative Policing Bureau that's also going to be working to make sure we're doing the intervention and the prevention so that we can stop these shootings from occurring early on, far upstream. But this is very serious stuff, and we are all hands on deck, making sure that we keep downtown Seattle and all of Seattle safe for everyone who lives and works and resides here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Scoggins. Before I do, I also want to thank him and thank our other folks who showed up and helped out last night, King County Metro, King County Sheriff's Office, a whole host of city personnel that were there, SDOT and Parks and many others, I'm forgetting some, were all there. And what it really showed me is that in a crisis, people in this city come together. They help each other out. We work together, we try to resolve issues, and we care about one another. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Scoggins.
Thanks. Hello, my name is Harold Scoggins, Fire Chief of the Seattle Fire Department. First, I want to start off by thanking our mayor and our police chief for their ongoing support and partnerships. And then I want to thank the members of the Seattle Police Department, along with all of our firefighter first responders. What many of you didn't get to see last night was many SPD officers took very intentional life-saving measures on some of the people that were injured, applying tourniquets and rendering first aid as our people arrived on the scene. And I know that made a difference. And to all the families out there, I want to echo the mayor's sentiments and let them know that the Seattle Fire Department, we're thinking about them, and the individual that lost their life, we're thinking about them also. So just after 5 o'clock, we started receiving calls along with Seattle Police Department of many people injured. When our firefighters arrived on scene, there were 8 people that were shot. Our firefighters and paramedics assessed all 8 of the victims, and 1 person was pronounced dead on scene, and she was approximately a 50-year-old female. Our units, along with our private partner, AMR, transported 7 patients to Harborview, and with multiple gunshot wounds in a variety of different places. Throughout the night, 4 of those 7 patients have been released, so they've been discharged from the hospital. 3 of those patients still remain in Harborview. 2, the most serious 2, were transported by our medic units last night, and both of them have now gone through surgeries for the wounds that they received. So they're still at Harborview. As I close, I want to put a call to action out to the community. It's during these times when we know the resources we need are sometimes scarce. And one of our partners in the community is Bloodworks Northwest. This is one of those times when, if the community member chooses to do something, our ask is that you go and give blood and help those in need. Thank you, and I'll turn it back over to the mayor now.
With that, I think we'll take some questions and answers. Before we do that, I also want to acknowledge Councilmember Herbold, who's behind me, who is the chair of the Public Safety Committee, and new Councilmember Andrew Lewis, who's his district that this occurred in. We've been briefing them. We also have a number of members of our cabinet, because public safety never involves just police. It's a cross-departmental thing that we try in every community to address a range of issues and needs. With that, if you have questions for the chief, either the chiefs or me.
Can you have emphasis patrols in the area at during time this summer? Do you regret pulling
We actually did not pull back. We've had emphasis patrols in that corridor on an ongoing and intermittent basis. We've actually had a number of operations that were active in that corridor, one of them that led to the officer-involved shooting. It's the reason that the police were able to respond within seconds is because we were actually had a number of operations already in that corridor. Chief, do you want to address that more?
Well, I can just say, the mayor, you've covered it. We had emphasis. We didn't pull back. We've always had extra resources out there. And as the mayor mentioned yesterday, we had folks out there on the Vibus operation when we had another incident occur. So we've been keeping people in the area.
Chief, I have a question about, so you arrested one of the suspects at Harborview. Was that suspect one of the shooting victims?
Yes. Yes. The suspect we arrested at Harborview did have a gunshot wound and also was a shooter.
And has that person been booked into jail? Or
Yes, booked into jail.
Have you made any determination on if that shooting yesterday was either connected to the one near Blanchard or the one from the day before at Westlake?
We have nothing at this point to connect it from the one the day before, but everything's under investigation. So this information is preliminary. As you know, we're ongoing, seeking out all information that we can on each of these incidents. So it would really be premature to speculate more than that.
Is this like the King County Sheriff's or the King County Prosecutor's Office?
There is not.
I'm going to ask you as a former federal prosecutor.
All right.
He knows this off the hook because we're talking about felonies here. Just a couple questions. I know you're talking about gun control and some of the strictest laws, as you said, in Seattle that we have in the country. There's going to be a narrative about, well, why aren't you already enforcing the laws that are on the books? So just to give you an idea of these two suspects, the chief already detailed their arrest history. These aren't people new to the system. One of them had 3 felony convictions just in March of 2019, so spent less than a year behind bars. The other one had a 1 felony conviction in March of 2019, unlawful possession of a firearm, a Class C felony, spent less than a year behind bars. How do we make sense of you guys saying that we're going to be strict on gun laws, and then when officers do arrest someone for serious crimes like felonies, we put them in jail for less than a year, and then they walk back out? So how do we square those two things?
So it's a great question, and I have to say for SPD, they are doing a great job at their job at arresting people. Once we arrest people, the system becomes diffused depending on whether it is a misdemeanor or felony, but it's one reason because of the gang connections, the repeated convictions, and the involvement of guns on a repeated basis that the chief and I have also talked to the federal prosecutor to see if we can get them involved as well. Because it is clear that what is the uptick in gang violence crosses Seattle thresholds, and sometimes those tools are able to take people and make sure that they are held accountable for a longer period of time in prison.
Why isn't a King County prosecutor representative here then? We've got municipal, but we don't have county.
Yep. And I don't know the answer to that because I didn't put together, but I'm sure that Dan Satterberg would be happy to answer some of these questions. And again, I don't have all the specifics on each of these individuals. I know basically the framework, Brandy, of what you've told us. And I will tell you, as a mayor and as a mother and as a former prosecutor, and as someone who cares about community, nobody in this community wants those people on the street. And we've got to find a way to end the violence on both ends. We've got to have as many diversionary programs as we have. We've got to provide our youth the opportunity for college. We've got to show them that they can be part of our economy. We've got to provide all that preventative stuff. Then we also have programs to get to people, have credible messengers, so they can say, don't go down this path, and those programs have been shown to work, and we invested almost $250,000 of new money in that. But when we have people who have repeatedly shown that they will take the community's safety in their own hands and disregard it, they have to be held accountable.
Just as a follow-up to that, though, just on the finer point, we live in a blue state. They're having talks in Olympia about gun control. We're proud of the strict gun control measures that we have. So how do we square that with county officials in King County giving someone who got convicted of unlawful possession of a firearm, a Class C felony, a slap on the wrist? How do those two things exist?
So I don't want to comment on the case because I don't know the file, and sometimes what comes out on the computer printout doesn't reflect everything that's in the case. So I don't want to do that. But I do want to say this about guns is, if this had been a fist fight, 8 people would not have ended up in the hospital. And we cannot avoid the fact and the truth that there are too many guns in our country and too many of them get into the hands of criminals. And we have got to stop the flow of guns into criminals' hands. And we have to hold the people accountable who use them in crimes, but we also have to make sure that if someone is, as the chief said, if you arrest someone with a MAC-10 with an extended magazine, you can shoot dozens and dozens of bullets. And if you do it in a crowded downtown area, you are going to hit innocent people. So these things all have to work in harmony. So I don't think in law enforcement and public safety, there is no or. There is only ands. We have to do it all.
Mayor, there have been a number of initiatives in the past, whether they be emphasis patrols or mass arrests, 9.5 blocks plan, where this area downtown has been flooded with officers. A lot of arrests have been made. Some environmental changes have been made. Now you're talking about a mobile unit. In the past, those efforts have happened for a couple months or a year, and then they've gone away, and then there's been another incident. What's different this time?
I think we're going to do a range of things. We're going to work with businesses to make sure that we can have that corridor safe. We're going to look at changes in terms of the physical structure. We're going to have more police in the zone and a mobile precinct. We're going to look at other options we can have to make sure that there is a greater presence of not just police but official activity. But anyone who is around the criminal justice system for any period of time knows that these types of crimes are episodic. And in our city, we have seen, for example, in gang violence when I was U.S. Attorney, it would rise and fall over a period of time. And you have to be able to be agile enough in law enforcement to address both the constant public safety threats that you have and step forward to address the rise in public safety threats as well. And I've got to give it to the chief. You know, we meet on a weekly basis and we probably talk multiple times a week. We look at the data in every neighborhood, almost sometimes down to the block, and trends of crimes. And she is readjusting her deployment in her precincts according to what she thinks needs to happen for public safety. There's never a guarantee in any city of our size that you won't have gun violence. There's no city in America that has that. But what the difference is in Seattle is, you know, we had about 28 homicides last year. There's cities smaller than us that had hundreds. I'm not saying that that excuses what we did. What I'm saying is we cannot let this be the new normal. So Dan, every time we see something like this, we are going to adjust our tactics to meet that threat. And then we're going to be looking at the intelligence to see where we think the next threat is coming, and we're going to deploy people with that. Chief,
It's been, it goes up and down, I understand that, but people for years have complained about that particular spot. People tell us they are still feeling unsafe. Will you be the mayor who finally fixes Third and Vine?
I will tell you this is, I will be the mayor that is going to try every single day to fix Third and Pine, and Fourth and Pine, and Fifth and Pine, and the courthouse, and Rainier Valley, and Lake City Way. We have to make sure that people in this city not only are safe, but feel safe. And our town corridor is still one of the safest in America. Let me give you a couple examples. We had thousands of people come to Westlake Mall for the tree lighting, just blocks from where this happened. Thousands of people on a night over a period of time and had no incidents whatsoever. We had thousands of people come to watch the Sounder Parade, no incidents whatsoever. 50,000 or more people travel that corridor every day. This incident is something we don't want to allow, but it does not define who we are. So there are different kinds of crimes. One of the reasons, and I'll let the chief address this, but that we were in that corridor working so hard is you've got both narcotics activity, which requires a certain type of response. This was gang activity, which requires deployment of different resources and different intelligence. And then we've had other public safety impacts related to behavioral health issues. All of those things are mixing together in a downtown corridor, but we have strategies to deal with each of them to keep our city safe. And I think I want to echo what the chief says. Our downtown is safe. We know people don't feel that, and we know this rattles people. No one in this room wasn't kind of thrown back on this. As I said, I've walked that block hundreds of times in my life. I grew up here. I walked it as a kid. I've walked it with my kids. And I want to make sure that every child, every parent, every worker, every resident of Seattle knows that every part of our city they belong in and is safe. With that, Chief, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, just quickly, Mayor, you covered it, but essentially the intersection of public health and public safety is always going to be a challenge. We have a whole host of different types of crimes that we're dealing with, all of the behavioral issues that we're dealing with, the other types of narcotics activity. And as you know, the officers are on the front lines every single day of, every single type of tragedy or crime that's out there. It is an inherently difficult job, and we're working to address all those different fronts. So, I'll take this moment to commend the men and women who are out there every single day rushing into these situations. We had over 100 officers out there yesterday, over 100. So even in a city like ours that is relatively safe, we still have, these challenges. So we're going to do everything we can to meet them on all the different fronts. And I'm going to go right here.
Plan going forward with third. What are people going to see in the next hours, days? Because they say, yes, the emphasis patrols help. but
Right.
We've been on lockdown 2 days in a row now because of shootings. So what are people going to see in the next hours and days that will look different?
Well, I told you we're going to have more resources out there. They're going to see the mobile precinct out there. We're bringing other officers in from other areas to assist us and augment, so we have higher visibility and augmentation, as well as you probably won't see the gang detectives, but there'll be additional gang detectives on that gang squad out there looking for shooters and putting shooters in handcuffs when we find them. So that's what's going to be happening. We'll be as transparent as possible about what we're doing, about the people we're arresting, the guns we're taking off the street. As the mayor mentioned, over 1,100 last year. So none of this is going unaddressed, and we're just going to make sure that we push even harder. And we're going to work with all of our partners. We've talked to both the U.S. Attorney, we've talked to the FBI, we've talked to the sheriff, the marshals. So all of those entities are coming together to really put a full effort into this.
And let me just add real quick to that, is to get the second part of your question is, we also have been working with our businesses and residents. We'll be meeting with them this afternoon and the coming days, both to listen to them to see if there's different areas we need to respond differently to, but also to assure them on the types of resources we're going to be deploying. And I think, as we've said before, it is a range of things you have to do. At 3rd and Pike, there's been a number of challenges with the location of the bus stop, the physical barriers, the businesses that operate there. We need to work with all the business and residents to see how we as a community come together to activate that space so that we know the citizens of Seattle can own that space and that people don't feel that there's too much criminal activity. We'll take 2 more questions.
Chair, as a follow-up to some of the things that have been asked, I don't know if this is a question for the mayor or the police chief or maybe even the city attorney. People hear about emphasis patrols all the time. We hear you're deploying more resources, you're putting more officers on the street. We hear that over and over again whenever they're shooting like this. But the violence still happens. What's the specific plan other than just putting more officers on the beat to stop this? Is it locking up criminals longer? Is it prosecuting them with tougher crimes? What is going to be done? People wanting to know.
So here's a couple things. Number one is, except for in a very few specific geographic areas and specific types of crime was down last year, and homicides were down last year. And so when these incidents occurs, it is important also for people to know and understand, just because a single act of violence occurs does not necessarily mean that is a trend. We have to look at it to see if it is a trend, and what we're seeing is an uptick in gang violence, not just in Seattle, but in King County. So working together with our partners, we know that we have to address that. But emphasis patrols are an ongoing thing, and what people don't see and what isn't reported on are the dozens of arrests that are made and have been made in recent months because of those emphasis patrols. Bad guys who were taken off the streets that kept people more safe. And so people should have confidence that it is not just during these announcements when things happen. It is happening every day in every precinct, in every part of the city, by the men and women of the Seattle Police Department, working together with our partners, and by the Seattle Fire Department with programs like Health One, trying to get to low acuity, so that we can know that we are going to do everything we can to make sure this kind of crime doesn't happen again. But there is no police chief in America, no mayor in America, and no city in America that does not have crimes of violence. What we have to assure is that this is not the new normal, and people see that we are going to take action. So you will see changes in that corridor, but you're also going to see changes on the other thing. We will continue to work and meet with community so they can get to the people who may be pointed toward crime, intervene, and make sure we prevent crime. So we have to use all of our resources together. We have to use our resources that we did for prevention and diversion to keep people out of the criminal justice system. And then when people are in the criminal justice system, we have to hold them accountable. And I think those two things working together are what provides public safety. And so again, we are not defined by last night, but we will make sure that last night does not define us. Thank you very much. That's it for now.
Yeah, we have more questions. Why can't we ask more questions?
We'll take a little bit more time. I don't want anyone to feel like we're going to take turns. You're not going to yell out.
First, are you going to close the McDonald's? Is that
So we've been talking, one of the things we're going to do is all of the businesses in that corridor can present different challenges at different times. And we will be working not just with McDonald's but others to see what they can do to help us make sure that that area stays safer. If that kind of work does not work together, we will look at other tools. But we don't know yet. It's premature. We want to make sure that we go down there, we understand the various businesses working together, and what the city can or cannot do. So I don't think that closing one business is going to change things overnight. What we want to do is what's happening together in that ecosystem that we need to do to make sure businesses are doing their part and we're doing our part.
I had a woman tell me today that last night this made her fearful. She lives downtown. This was kind of the last straw, and she's thinking about moving out of downtown now because of the ongoing problems that she's been seeing for more than a year now. She's been there for a year. She was also saying that she feels like this city, or at least this area, is in crisis, and I'm wondering if you feel that way as well.
No, I do not think Seattle's in crisis. I think that Seattle is a big city that has like other big city challenges, but if you look at our city compared to other cities, the Seattle Police Department is doing an excellent job. That doesn't mean that we don't have areas that we have to work on. But we have to make sure that when people do bad things, we hold them accountable. We also have to have systems in place to prevent people from doing bad things. And we also have to create an atmosphere where we don't define our city or create a hysteria. We got a report as I was driving down here tonight that they thought there was an active shooter, a particular location with 40 shots fired. Turned out it was false. But a person was on edge. They heard balloons popping. So the trauma is real. It hits everybody hard, and we know that. And that's a real thing. It's why we are going to be out walking the neighborhood, listening to people, talking to people, and doing it not just downtown, but in the other areas of our city who feel anxiety. This affects communities, neighbors, friends, all over our city. So I want to say to that woman, what you're feeling is real and natural and human. Work with us because Seattle is safe, and we want to help you help us.
Businesses, but there are a lot of businesses that are no longer in that core. How much of that is related to the crime that's been going on, not just for years, but for decades?
Yeah.
And what do you tell them? We've heard that some of them are still planning on moving out, some that have not had those plans.
Yeah, we've been talking to the downtown businesses for the 2 years I've been mayor. We have a unfortunate confluence of events where almost every city in America is losing its retail businesses. It is just a shift in our economy, and it's harder and harder to have brick and mortar. And so we want to do what we can both to make sure they're supported and there's a public safety reason for them to move. But we've got to figure out a whole range of ways. I think we saw a couple years back, Westlake Park used to be some place that people were afraid to go. We activated that park together with the Downtown Seattle Association, took it back, had it for the people, and I think everyone in this room has walked through that park at different parts of the day, and it is a different place. Same with Occidental Park. You know, when I was growing up here, I worked in a warehouse in Pioneer Square and had to walk across Occidental Park every morning, and it was scary then. Occidental Park today is different because people have said we are going to take that park and make it for the community. So we need to work block by block with community to say, what do we do as a city? What do we do with businesses? How do we get this community together? And then how do we do it for the long term? Because Dan's right. It can be episodic. People come together, population shift, crime shifts 4 blocks. Crime is never static, but community's response, again, I want to emphasize, this was a terrible night for Seattle. But in that terrible night, just like at Lake City, I think we saw the true character of the people of Seattle. People who could have just been frightened and run away and hidden, and instead saw people in need and themselves went and rendered aid. To me, that's inspiring. And what we have to say is, how do we make sure people are affirmed in that and can continue to do that? And we work together as a city to make sure that we can come together and prevent crime everywhere we can, that we try to make sure that gun violence is reduced because access to guns is less.
Mayor, you mentioned,
Go ahead.
I have just a quick question. You mentioned that there's going to be a mobile unit at the courthouse. Why at the courthouse when the incident occurred so far?
We've had the mobile unit at the courthouse. Continuing. We're going to retain it there. We're bringing a second mobile unit in the corridor that will be at Westlake.
But why there?
Why where?
Why are you utilizing a mobile unit? You announced two mobile units.
It's been there for a while.
Okay, so
For the
there's
same
nothing
reasons.
at the courthouse?
No,
Okay.
for the same reasons.
How many of the victims are connected to that argument? You mentioned one was arrested and was part of the argument. Were any of the other victims connected to that argument?
Not to our knowledge.
Right.
Is that correct, Chief?
Yeah. So there are three people, I'll just make it, 3 people involved in an argument in front of the McDonald's, 3 people seen with handguns, 3 people fleeing, and so.
Only the
yeah.
one person treated at Harborview
Right.
was one of the shooters. He's been arrested and charged.
Yes.
You mentioned
got
that
it.
gang connections with the suspects, and mentioned an uptick in gang violence in the area, and also you
Which is
mentioned
probably
the
you.
dispute. Do you know that this dispute outside the McDonald's was a gang dispute? Or
Yeah, we don't have that information. We'd be, we're still looking for the 2 at-large people, so we have no idea about that. I can tell you that for sure one of the folks is, the one in custody is a known gang member. So that we do know. And I wouldn't speculate on anything other than that.
The mobile command unit, those will be there on a 24-hour basis, is that right? For the foreseeable future?
Let me double check with my chief.
No, we're looking at peak pedestrian business times, so
Right.
early morning into the late evening.
Right,
So
yeah.
always see an officer
No, no.
presence there?
Yeah, of course,
Okay.
yeah.
Chief Best, you mentioned resources and you want to cut off gun violence upstream or preventative. There's been staffing issues with SPD. Has that prevented you in the past with cutting off?
As the mayor mentioned, we partner with a whole host of agencies that focus on intervention and prevention. I think recently, one of the programs, the name escaped me, Mayor, that you just donated over $250,000 to?
Choose 180.
Choose 180. Sorry, I can't remember the name of everything, but Choose 180. So we're working with them and other organizations like them on intervention and prevention efforts. So that's very important to us. And
Staffing been an issue?
well, I'm not sure I follow you.
SPD's had a problem just hiring over the last.
Well, yeah, we're working on staffing. And actually, this year we had 16. We hired 16 more than left the organization. We're on an upward trend. We're doing everything that we can to make sure that we have appropriate staffing levels. But this incident last night is not related to a staffing issue in the Seattle Police Department. People with guns who shouldn't have had the guns in an area firing shots, and so that's why we want to make sure we keep that continued presence.
Can you talk about the gun? Have you recovered any firearms from this? Can you paint a picture of the scene itself? How many bullets do you think were fired?
Yeah, we're not going. Yeah. I'd love you. I know you'd love to hear every specific investigative detail, but a lot of this is evidence, and we want to go at some point to trial and be able to present that without presenting it beforehand. I can tell you multiple shell casings, over 20 were collected. 3 different calibers of shell casings were collected. No handgun has been recovered at this point yet, and that we're working on locating those 2 people who are at large, and hope to secure more information and more evidence when we do.
David Croman hasn't had a chance. He gets the last question.
Oh, David, you're out of the limelight. Sorry.
Easy one. Are the emphasis patrols permanent now, or is there a time limit on the emphasis patrols in that area? Because they've been there for, 6 months now?
Off and on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's all, I'm repeating what you've already said, Mayor. It's off and on. So an emphasis means that we have an uptick, we have a hot spot, we add resources there so we can deal with whatever that issue is that's occurring. So that we have to have flexibility with that. So sometimes we move resources to other places and emphasize there. And then maybe a problem comes back, we move it around. So there's no definitive cutoff date for it. We're just going to look and make sure that we're doing what we can for what we're dealing with at that moment.
And we're trying to be data driven. As you know, we join it not just with the surgeon police. But behind me, you see Office of Economic Development, Department of Neighborhoods, Public Utilities.
Yep.
Those people come in as well to see if we can do some holistic changes to a neighborhood, whether it's street lights or cutting back brush or making sure the businesses can stay open, to getting rid of graffiti. We do a range of things in addition to police. And David, also, there's no start and finish date. We're very data driven on it. And in addition, I know it sounds a little corny, but we try not to announce when we're done. Because sometimes the criminals read the paper.
What can you tell us about the victim? I mean, there was a wheelchair that was at the scene for hours when the fatality victim was still on the sidewalk. Everybody else had been taken to the hospital. Was the woman who died a member of the disabled community?
So out of the privacy interests of the victim, we've not been able to reach the victim's family, last I heard, and we'd rather not discuss any specifics until we were able to speak with the family. I will say that we've gotten reports from the hospital that the other woman is still in critical condition. The young boy did go through surgery but did very well. That we've had people at the hospital to give the family support who are there, and we are very hopeful that everyone else will do well. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We're done now.
Thank you. Prosecutor, question if
Thanks,
I may.
guys.
Yeah, can you paint